Okay, the bells have just tolled, so it must be 6:30. So let's, without any further ado, let's get going. So I'm Paul Harper, the chair of the Planning and Healthier, Stronger Communities Policy Advisory Committee. I have to think of a longer name for next year. And I'd like to welcome everybody here to the meeting, including any public who may be watching on our webcast. The meeting's being broadcast as we speak on the webcast, but does anybody else want to record it tonight? No? Okay, we'll rely on the webcast. And if the fire alarm does go off, Cassie will go and investigate while we remain here, and then she'll come back and tell us what we need to do. So, and there's no planned fire drills or anything for tonight. I've changed the running order, if that's okay, of the papers. I'm bringing item 14, which is the Headcall Neighbourhood Plan, after item 10, which is the options for the care homes, because when I was doing the briefing, officers for those two items don't need to stay for the rest of the agenda, so I thought it seemed fair to do that. So is that everyone happy with that? Change of order? Great. Okay, thanks. Any apologies for absence? Yeah, Claudine.
Apologies from Councillor Forecast.
Thank you. Any notification of substitute members? Well, I can't see any. No. Okay. So urgent items. You've got a new copy on your desk of the map for the Lewes Conservation Area. It sort of adds in an area which had been missed off on the previous map. So everybody's happy with that. We'll take that as an urgent update on the Lewes item. Great. Thank you. Next item is notification of any visiting members. Unless they're hiding under a chair, I can't see any. And so there's none. Then it's disclosures by members and officers. So has anyone any issue they need to make a disclosure on? No. Anyone been lobbied on anything tonight? No, this is quick. If we keep up this, we could be finished by 2:15. Item 7, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. And I propose everything's in public. Is that agreed? Excellent. That takes us on to item 8 on page 1 to 4 of our PAT, which are the minutes of our meeting held on the 2nd of July. So if we just go through page by page for accurateness. I think I've got that wrong, didn't I? Page 1, 2, 3, and 4. So can we agree those are correct record? Excellent. Right, so item number 9, which is the forward plan. It's starting on pages 5. I don't know if anybody from the cabinet or the officers wish to add anything, or any member wish any questions. The only thing I would warn people is we must expect our October meeting is going to be quite a busy meeting because we've got quite a lot of heavy items on it. So we've got, sorry, Claudine. Oh, well, I was only going to say, because we've got the local plan update, we've got the Lenham Heathlands SPD document, and I think we're having the Gypsy and Traveller consultation document, aren't we? So there's quite a few big items there, so I just suspect everyone to be prepared for October to be quite a long meeting. Claudine.
Thank you. It was just regarding the item on page 12, which is to do with the air quality annual status report. I mean, it says on there that the info was submitted to DEFRA at the end of 2025, in June, sorry, 2025. So by the time we get that in November, it's going to be quite a few months on, and then I just noticed it was only for noting. So I kind of wondered if there was actually any real point in that report coming to the committee, or whether we could just have a briefing note done. And we could probably have the briefing note done earlier, couldn't we, if it was just the items that had already been submitted in June.
Anyone wish to comment on that? That would seem to me to make sense. If not, can we perhaps suggest Cassie and also to contact Clive as relevant cabinet member to see, rather than taking an agenda item, if we just produce a briefing note, it'll have the same information for us. Okay. So that takes us on to agenda item 10, which is a request for policy planning guidance on care homes, bracket C2 use class. So I've got Brian, if you take Councillor Harwood first.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Colleagues will recall Councillor Clark, his ward had quite a few issues coming up around care home provision and the limitations of the planning framework to address concerns. Off the back of that, Councillor Clark brought the issue up at the last Policy Advisory Committee, and there was quite a good discussion actually within the meeting. But officers have gone away since that meeting and had a look at the planning and legislative context for care homes. And it is quite clear that some of the issues raised, such as the kind of staffing concerns, they actually fall outside of the scope of the planning system, and they're more appropriately addressed through the relevant care regulations, or indeed operational management, which is linked in some ways, but sometimes falls short. The report on the papers in front of you on page 12 also gives consideration to imminent national planning system reforms, and that does touch upon some issues related to care home provision. So another interesting point there is around supplementary planning documents and the fact that they may not have as long a shelf life as perhaps we hope they would, and we may well be looking at a different kind of planning policy guidance note coming through. So it's all within the report, and just to sum up, the report recommends that the topic is best addressed through perhaps other routes, and maybe the new local plan, and looking holistically at specific need policies. Perhaps it can be tackled there, but I will hand you over to my planning policy colleagues who may be able to add some kind of flesh to the bones of why they got to where they got. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, in fact, I think we're all aware of fairly fundamental changes that are taking place to the planning system at the moment, and the significant amount of uncertainty that is currently in place. I think, you know, for some reassurance, we will be bringing a report. It's our intention to bring a report to the October meeting of this 14th of October regarding the new local plan, where we'll have the opportunity to kick things off and, you know, consider some of the matters that are pressing at the moment. It seems like there is an ideal opportunity for us to incorporate housing need, and including care home provision within that new local plan, and investigate it in terms of the evidence requirements and whether or not we can seek to further influence the way that care homes are brought forward locally in Maidstone Borough. So I think there are opportunities that are there, notwithstanding the fact that perhaps the current methods that we would normally employ, such as supplementary planning documents, are facing significant uncertainty at this time, hence the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to officers and the Cabinet member for the comprehensive report. This actually is going to be very useful going forward, even in the short term, just to have all of this information in one place, because just meeting with the parishes, I've been asked how many have they've been in Maidstone, what's the background, what is the scope of legislation and planning policy. So even in terms of clarifying where we are at the moment, this is actually a very useful document. I do understand the fact that the planning rules are changing, and I accept that, so I wouldn't be looking to do anything beyond the recommendation in the short term. I do think that we do need this, and the need for it is actually becoming greater as we go forward. And some of those things are some of the need, or some of the need to have policy around something is because of the extra number of applications that are coming through, and conversions under permitted development. And I could guess that that may have something to do with Section 24, where one of the instances on this list, I won't go into detail, but the owner essentially said, well, if I can't convert it to a care home, I'll just have to rent it out. But clearly they've gone one way rather than the other, because if you're loaning money to buy a property, it's far more beneficial to make it a commercial property than a residential property and fall under Section 24. And I think that's probably going to make this type of application more and more frequent as we go forward. So I'm happy to propose the papers. We move it forward in the local plan process. I think there's no reason why we would do it earlier than that, given the information in the report. And I hope we can move this forward as part of that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'm happy to second the proposal. But when we start to look at this as part of the local plan update, I think it might be useful just to look at where we've got Appendix 1, which is looking at the past 18 months. Possibly we could go back a bit further in terms of having more data. It's just that in my own ward down in Fan, there's an area where we've had at least 3 of these conversions done, probably in the last 2.5 years, all in virtually next to each other. And there are some local issues coming up. So I think, if we go back, we'll probably find quite a lot more coming through as well. Yeah.
A point I didn't mention is the fact that quite often with the local plan, we come up with an allocation for a certain type of housing or provision. And when applications come to planning that are outside of that, we've got the option to say, we're not sure there is entirely a need to that because we've got an allocation in the local plan. So I think that even the fact that we will be thinking about it and coming up with a way that we allocate spaces will be helpful overall with the applications going forward.
Okay, Claudine, Councillor.
Just a point that we just need to be cognizant of permitted development. I mean, with the HMO SPD, that has not got round the permitted development. If we looked at an SPD for that, this would not get round the permitted development. So I think, yes, we can look at some of these things with the local plan, quite happy to go with your recommendations, but it doesn't get us around the area of permitted development, and none of this stuff will.
Okay, we're all happy to agree the recommendations then? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So if we now turn to page 193, which is item 14, which is the Headcorn Neighbourhood Plan, and I look to Councillor Harwood to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues may recall we provided a briefing on the Headcorn Neighbourhood Plan, I think back in March, really back in the early spring. Since that date, the referendum on whether the neighbourhood plan is accepted by the local community took place in late June, I think 26th of June, and 92% of the voters in Headcorn supported that neighbourhood plan. And I think that is, I think actually in the report it mentions 98% at one point, but that is a bit ambitious, but 92% is still pretty good. Therefore, we've gone through the Section 38 8-week period for adoption, and therefore it's coming to Policy Advisory Committee before it goes to Cabinet, and then it will need to go to full council before it will take full effect. But it will be quite a strong material planning consideration now, because it's gone through all of the stages required of it, and had a very significant majority in favour. So I don't, again, if officers want to add anything.
Yes, just to add that it's as Councillor Harwood said, yes, it's gone through the referendum, so it's now it comes into force, and then it proceeds to Cabinet and then full council. And just for clarity, if members, as per the paper, the only way we can stop it coming into force is by the legislative requirements set out within the report, which are EU obligations in legislation brought forward. But this has already gone through an examination where that has been examined already by an examiner, and they've not raised any concerns. So it would have to be new concerns that haven't previously been raised.
Thank you. Has any councillors wished to say anything? Dennis? I thought you said. Okay, in which case I propose the two recommendations on page 194. That the result of the referendum held on the 8th of July. Is that the right date? 2021? Anyway, double check the year. On the Headcool Neighbourhood Plan be noted, and that the council be recommended to make the Headcool. There's something, the drafting on these recommendations are missing wording. I just realised. Because obviously the referendum was this year. Councillor Russell.
I think we might need to make a small change to that recommendation. I think on page 197 it says the referendum took place on 26th of June 2025. So change that and then.
Yeah, and then the second recommendation is the council be recommended to presumably adopt. Would that be it? Because you don't make. So I would suggest the second recommendation needs to be adopt. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Okay, but so with those two amendments, everybody happy? Yep. Okay, great. Thanks very much for coming. That takes us back to page 25 of your pack, which is the Lewes Valley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. And I just remind everybody we've got the updated map to go with it. So I'll look to Councillor Harwood to introduce the report.
I think that, frankly, these reports don't really need much introduction, so I think I hand over to the experts and they can talk you through where we are currently. Thank you.
So this is an item to allow the conservation area to go to the public consultation. It's a legal requirement and includes the appraisal, the management plan. It's quite similar to the previous ones. And there is a boundary extension that you can see already on the updated map.
Councillor Cox. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, I guess the thing to mention first of all is that the page 18 plan is incorrect, and I'll be proposing the papers, but I just really want to make sure that the amendment of that plan is updated in the document before it goes to public consultation. As context, if you look at if you hold it with the wording, this urgent update, if you hold it with the wording to your right in a sort of portrait format, that's north-south, you'll see the Lewes Valley. We've been working on this for probably more than 10 years, because back in the day when we had no 5-year housing supply in around about 2015, we learnt from officers that the whole side of the Lewes Valley leading up to Busbridge Road and Stockett Lane was completely unprotected and could potentially be at risk of housing development. So what the mechanism we used at that time, we wanted to update the conservation area maps and plan, but because there was no review going on, our best way forward was to do this through landscape of local value, with a view that when this does come up for renewal, we will then pick up those changes at that point. So it's taken a long memory and 10 years, but it has come around. So that was our first sort of point where we could migrate those into the conservation area plan. The error that's in the document at the moment that's been corrected here was purely an error. We were focusing on the additional areas on the western side, assuming that the whole of the management area that's currently in place would be there. And just because it's incorrectly shown in the document, that was purely an error. I spoke to the officer earlier, and she said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, that was an error." They've produced this very quickly, so I'm quite pleased with that, because she was away this week. So I really congratulate you for doing that so responsively. The one point that I just wanted to make, and it's to do with further consultation with the parish, and that is, again, if you hold it north-south, on the sort of the southwestern tip, I've spoken with officers about coming down the two fields, so ever so slightly on the southwestern side, coming into the sort of dark green area, just so that we can take in the whole of Old Lewes Hill, because we do have heritage landscapes at that point. We've got a green space, and we've got some ancient hedgerows, and I've spoken to officers about that, and they feel that would be suitable. So I'd like to propose the papers with the modification of the map in the document to be this map with that small extension, and I'm happy for that to go forward to public consultation. And I've spoken to the parish at length about it, and I've worked with Togwell Parish Council, and they're very happy with this as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. So perhaps on the recommendations, we just need to annotate recommendation 1 to mention the urgent update map, just so it's very clear. And yeah, anybody else? I mean, I'm happy. Sorry, I'll second that. And I was actually about to raise the same issue on the map. So, anybody else? Any questions they'd like to raise on this at the moment? No. If not, so with that extra wording just on recommendation 1, referencing the map, the urgent update map, can we agree the 2 recommendations? Oh, sorry, and those 2 fields. Old Lewes Hill and Wells Street. Yeah. Okay, you got that, Cassie? Right. Okay, well, with those couple of amendments, is everybody happy with that we agree these then? Yeah. Great. Okay, so thank you for that. That brings us on to item number 12 on page 79 of our pack, which is Boxley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. I think it was public consultation rather than public consult, but I look to the Cabinet Member, Tony Harwood, to introduce this.
Thank you, Chairman. And much the same, I'll hand over to Ingrid in a minute, but I think in terms of this report, because Boxley Village sits on the scarp slope of the Kent Downs National Landscape, that there is more protection for some of the landscape areas around, and therefore this document is very much focused on the village centre itself. I mean, quite interestingly, I think on page 94, there's a picture of the King's Arms. I think probably my great-great-grandmother would have been the licensee at this time this photograph is taken, which a little link to it, but I'll hand over anything you want to add.
I think it's worth to mention that it's also included the designation of Boxley Abbey Conservation Area. It seems page 111, just in case, just get missed from the main appraisal.
Okay, before I open this up to members, I had a question, I suppose. Although I can see on page 111 about the Boxley Abbey de-designation, I must admit I wasn't completely convinced by the rationale. Yes, we can de-designate the area as is suggested, and it does have protection as a scheduled monument, but surely isn't it better always to have the maximum protection you can on any site, so still being a conservation area in addition being a scheduled monument would just give it that additional protection. I'm just thinking of planning pressures going forward and thinking of the maximum safeguards we can give anything. I don't know, yeah, Ingrid, if you've got
The
any thoughts on
conservation
that.
area is not providing any other kind of protection that the scheduled monument it's already provided to all the sites. So there is not going to be any change on protection. Usually scheduled monuments are more protected than conservation areas. So on this case, being a conservation area is not providing anything. There is no any TPOs. It's being consulted with the 3 officers. All the buildings are listed or scheduled monuments, and it's 95% it's a private land. So removing that as a conservation area is not going to change anything. The buildings are going to be protected. The site is going to be protected. So that's the reason why we're requesting that.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else, any questions or anything they want to raise on this? Sorry, I should have come to you, Stephen, as the ward councillor.
Not at all, Chairman, because I'm asking to speak by swapping hats, both as Boxley Downs Chair and, as Ward Member and Chair of Boxley Parish Council. It was of great interest to see the timetable for the review of the conservation areas, the appraisals and management plans last year, and there was some surprise in the Boxley Parish Office when the existence of this process was brought to their attention. I and we are hugely grateful to Janice and Ingrid and all the officers for accelerating the process. Boxley was moved up the timetable to have these important areas brought into this consideration. All Boxley Parish councillors have seen these papers and were all roundly impressed, and they didn't have any comments to make, and if you know Boxley you'll know that itself is a compliment. So we're very grateful to officers. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just double check nobody else wants to raise anything. No? If not, then let's turn our attention to the recommendations on page 80. And the first one is that the draft area appraisal and management plan for Boxley Conservation Area be approved for public consultation. And then the second one is to recommend that the delegated powers be given to the head of development, the head of development management to undertake the necessary statutory requirements to undertake the public consultation for the draft Boxley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. Do we need a recommendation about the de-designation of the Boxley Abbey Conservation Area in this? I mean, I don't, because currently it is a conservation area. If we're proposing to de-designate it, surely something has to be put through. Well, shall we, if we're going to de-designate it, perhaps we should have it as a third recommendation that we recommend to the Cabinet that they agree the de-designation of the Boxley Abbey Conservation Area, just so it's clear. Yeah. Okay, great, okay. Can I see a seconder, please? Yeah, thank you. So is that agreed? Excellent, thank you. He just gone 7. That takes us on to agenda item 13, which is starts on page 131, which is the East Farley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. And again, I look to Councillor Harwood to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll defer to Ingrid if there's anything that needs to be added to this one.
There is only an extension for Lower Road Conservation Area. There are 2 of them. For Downing Street, there is no any extension proposed. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Keel, it's your ward, isn't it?
Thank you. Got a couple of questions about this. So these are the only conservation areas in East Farley. So when we talk about a conservation area, can I just be completely clear what we are preserving? Because sometimes it's Sue's property, sometimes it's hedgerows, sometimes it's brick walls, and there are other things. And so Gallants Lane is mentioned once about Gallants Manor, which is a rather fabulous place up there. There's some other quite old properties up there, and it's a really nice area, not least of all because it's the road I live in, which is completely, just to be completely transparent. But that's not mentioned in here at all. Is that because there's so little of it? What's the rationale behind that? Because I asked this before about Coxheath and I think it got a bit confused, but I just want to understand why it's these two hamlets and not the third hamlet of East Farley. The other bit, which is quite a sizable bit, there seems to be no protection there, and I'm a little bit twitchy, and I think we might have to turn the webcam off in a minute because I want to talk about something else, about development. So I think we probably maybe need to have that conversation because of it being public.
Well, because we've agreed to do it all in public, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't think we can go into part two because we agreed earlier it would be in part one. So if you could, I don't know, try to sort of get your comments across without being specific on any property.
Yep. No, that's fair enough. It didn't occur to me properly till, that's why I didn't mention it earlier on. The issue is there's always going to be the want for land, and there's a lot of land up there, a lot of fields, a lot of land, probably more so than is here. So does the Lower Road one completely cover all the Roman villas and all the things that are there? Everything's completely covered, because when I looked at the map I wasn't sure if it completely covered some of the excavations that were there. It completely covers them? No. It doesn't?
This is only a review of an existing conservation areas. We only look at it when it was there and it needed an extension. But that's quite far from the existing conservation areas, but we can look at it. But if you're referring to the Roman archaeological sites,
yeah,
they are already protected because there's been excavations going on.
okay.
And they're going to take into account if there is any development going on. KCC is going to be involved on that case.
Okay, but thank you. That's one question.
Yeah.
So the other one is, those two roads. There's this one as well, and that it wasn't until Councillor Clark mentioned the possibility of building that leaves the remaining road quite open in a lot of ways. And if this is where I'm going to struggle, and I would like to have a bit more, what's the word? Things have been suggested for that area, and that opens it up to a lot more being suggested, which is what I'm trying to very delicately raise, if you get my drift.
Councillor Clark.
Just to give some context, if you look at the going back to the Lewes area conservation plan, there's lots of land outside of that which we would obviously be concerned if it was, but we were looking specifically at the landscape feature. What is the Lewes Valley? And even though we could potentially go a bit further and sort of extend it and you know potentially protect something, it isn't really the mechanism is to say what is the feature and how do you protect that and how do you bound it. So I think on top of that, this isn't predominantly about housing. Obviously, we felt that the valley might be at risk, but it's predominantly there to protect the valley rather than to sort of put a catch-all over it. But the other thing I would say is this is going out to public consultation. So if there's anything in there that does need clarification, there is a lot of scope to talk to the parish and give that feedback as part of the public consultation, because it will be coming back here and we can have another discussion about it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just want to raise a concern though. Sorry,
No, thank you for raising that point. Actually, I had one when I was looking at it earlier today. If we look at the map on page 138, where you've got the current conservation area in the sort of inside the dotted line. And then the red line is the proposed extension to include Farley Bridge. When you read the text in sort of detail, it refers to the views of Farley Bridge from the rear of the church and also from the bridge looking up to the church. And so I just wondered whether, when you're looking at that map, so if you look at that area to the left, or to the left of the road coming up from the bridge and to the rear of the church, that's, for those views, that piece of land needs to be protected, because that's the field or the land you're looking across to get the view, looking down to the bridge, and then equally from the bridge, if you like, looking up to the back of the village. And I'm just wondering whether there would be a logic in terms of protecting that view as linked in with the text to include that, it's not quite rectangular, is it? Whatever shape field it is within the proposed extension. Because otherwise, I say, it just supports the text of what we're trying to achieve. So, if ever, so I suppose I'll propose that as an amendment. That we add in the field or the land to the north of the parish church and west of Station Road to provide the protection for the views over down to the bridge and up to the church. Anybody? Yeah, Councillor Russell.
Well, I was just thinking it depends on what your timescale is, isn't it? Because if they obviously wouldn't be able to send it out for consultation like this, if you want it like a different way. But if you want to send it out to consultation and then work to maybe change it after, that might be a quicker timescale to getting the whole thing in place. I don't know. I just suddenly thought that because presumably what they're asking is to send this current paperwork out for consultation. So as I see it, our only options are like yes, go to consultation, or no. And if you say no, then what will happen is they'll build in some time to change it all and then send it to consultation. And it will have to come back to a meeting to then for us to agree for it to go to consultation. So I just wanted to put that thought out there.
Yeah, I'll take Councillor Clark and I'll come back.
From my perspective, I don't know what East Farley's Parish Council would have thought about that. I assume that they would want to protect that area because it is sort of the setting of these buildings that we're trying to protect. But if we haven't had that representation, I'm a bit concerned about talking on their behalf. But if it comes back here and they are mindful and that's along the lines, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't, then I would support it. It's just not knowing the background is a bit tricky.
So would a better way then be that we approve the report, but that we ask the parish council, because we can ask the cabinet member to ask the parish council their views on that as part of the consultation, so that way it sort of gets picked up without preventing anything going ahead, yeah? Sorry.
They're already aware of the boundary extension. They just never came back. I sent a few emails. So they are aware of what is going on there because I request them any kind of, as it's been talking with Luz, any kind of extension. And now they have the draft and they need to come back to me with any changes. Maybe that it's going to come up with their comments, but it's unsure.
I mean, I'm worried about unintended consequences. So I think perhaps given the information from the officer, I think maybe we should propose the papers, and as chair, if you wanted to make direct contact separately and perhaps bring that back when it comes back to us, or even with that discussion, you could perhaps look to see if they would make a submission.
Okay, we'll do it that way then. So we just go with the recommendations on this, and I shall contact the parish council on behalf of the committee and ask them to look at that. Okay. Sorry? Right. Okay, so, right, are we happy to agree that then? In which, thank you, which then takes us on to our penultimate item, which starts on page 201. A lot of papers to flick through. Which is the annual performance report 2024-25. I think, Carly, you're going to introduce that to us this evening.
Thank you, Chair. So as you said, this is the annual performance report for 24-25. The report sets out our position for the KPIs that fall under this committee and this committee only. But it is reminded 24-25 was the final year of the previous administration's strategic plan. So therefore the KPIs are still aligned to those strategic priority areas. Where we are able to, we have made reference within the visual document of how that factors over to the current administration's corporate plan. And in addition to the report, I'd just like to take the opportunity to remind the committee that we do have a KPI dashboard available on the Council's website. We aim to refresh that dashboard every month if we can, if monthly data exists, but it just allows you greater and more timely ability to monitor that performance position more frequently. So just briefly onto the report, the 28 KPIs fall under this Policy Advisory Committee. Within the year, 15 were not targeted and just provide for informational context. But of those that did have a target, a rather positive outlook with 84.6% meeting the target that was assigned to them for the year. I think there was just one that missed by less than 10% their target and one that missed by more than 10%. And just to highlight some strong performance across the planning service in the KPIs, although we recognise that demand in the service has reduced overall since the pandemic. Also, the number of new additional homes continues to fall, again, as it has done since the pandemic and is reflected nationally also. And also to note that whilst the footfall at the Leisure Centre did fail to hit the annual target, there was a significant growth in numbers once the pool upgrades and the subsequent reopening happened throughout the year. And if you take a look at the charts, there is it has exceeded its greatest number of footfall seen in the quarter since the pandemic after the reopening. So you're recommended to note the performance position as at the end of the financial year, including any actions that might be proposed to be taken. And as always, if appropriate, consider any additional recommendations for further analyses, improvements to performance which you might find appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I might just like to draw members' attentions to two items on these KPIs, which I think may be relevant to future discussions here. One is the one on page 215-16, which is around the house building, the number of houses completed in the borough. And you can see on that table the drop-off of completions. And obviously we're all cognizant of the fact that we at the moment don't have a 5-year housing supply. The building trend at the moment is going down. That's not likely to improve over the next year or two. So that might be something we want to think about as we go into the local plan review. And the other one I've spotted, which it could be of concern, is on page 222, which is the percentage of unemployed residents under 16 plus young people. Whilst the overall percentage is relatively low, if you look at that chart, which are sort of authorities which SIPFA would tend to match us to as sort of authorities similar to us, other than Dacorum and Colchester, we are sitting with the highest rate of unemployment in the youth population. So again, maybe something we might want to think about as we look at things like local plans and so on going forward. So anyone, yeah, Councillor Russell.
Just a couple of points. I always love this page that you put in on page 212, because I just think that just shows it all really well. And you could just pick that up and you'd be like, okay, I've read the whole report, which is not what I did, because on page 217, I think that's just building on what we noticed when we did our enforcement review in overview and scrutiny, which was that there's less enforcement complaints being received, but the number of enforcement cases that are closed and the priority twos dealt with in time is going down. So I think that just shows that when we did that review, it matched with that, and then the recommendations went forward, which Cabinet thankfully took on, but it shows that those things all tie in, and hopefully something that will be being addressed very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone else, any comments on this? If not, if we turn to page 202, we've got the two recommendations for us. So the first one is that the annual performance position for 2024-25, including any actions suggested or proposed, be noted. And secondly, additional recommendations to further analyse what we haven't suggested any, have we? So we don't need additional recommendation to, do we?
I would have thought that Cabinet would put forward some changes to KPIs, because this is still aligning with the old corporate plan, which is now the corporate strategy, which will have its own KPIs, which will be coming forward, which I think is what Carly was saying. So until they've changed them all, had a look at them and done all of that, I don't think it would be odd if we just added a random one now, I think.
Let's just go with the two recommendations as they're written then. So I take it you're seconding that. So can everyone happy with those recommendations? Yep. Which then takes us nicely onto our last item, and we're beating our scheduled time of an hour, which is the first quarter financial update for 2025-26. I think, Mark, you're going to introduce that to us tonight.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, the Policy Advisory Committees have budget monitoring within their remit, and this report sets out the position for the first quarter of 25-26 and a projected position for the year. And so far as the services covered by this committee are concerned, we're projecting a small overspend for the year of £50,000. And just to put that in context, the overall position for the council is to be a variance of even less than that, 26,000. So overall across the council, we're projecting a position pretty much in line with budget. So far as the particular adverse variance in this committee is concerned, it's to do with the Innovation Centre, where surprisingly for a relatively new building, we had to do some repairs on our conditioning units in the quarter, which went over the budget. And that also had an impact on the revenue, because it held up the work of finding tenants for vacant spaces. And we've been on an upward trajectory so far as filling up space at the Innovation Centre is concerned, but just a bit of a hitch along the way. But we're hopeful that income will recover in the remainder of the year, and we are getting plenty of interest in the units at the Innovation Centre. And the other area covered in the report is capital expenditure, and we're projecting some slippage into next year, so unspent budgets. And included amongst those unspent budgets is the budget on the flood barrier project for a flood barrier at the Fan Meadow underpass at the bottom of Medway Street. There was a report to do with this that went to the Climate Transition Corporate and Environmental Services Committee last night, explaining the reasons for the delay on that project, and I can elaborate further this evening if members are interested. So I'll leave it at that, but I'm happy to take any questions, and likewise the Cabinet members will, I'm sure.
Okay, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. That flood barrier has been unspent as long as I've sat on this council. So I think, yeah, it's probably going to continue. But I think, you know, obviously you've got some plans for that, but that just sits there for years. My questions are to do with the Moat Park kiosk refurbishment and extension is going to come in a third over what was estimated, and I just wondered if you could explain a bit behind that, what that reasoning was. That was my first question. I've got another one. Thank you.
Yes, the problem there, as I understand it, is that when we got estimates for the work, we didn't understand all the things that were underneath the ground there, and Moat Park has got pipe work and stuff running underneath which we wouldn't have known about, and it seems that we had to dig that out and had to dig more deeply in creating the foundation, so that was the reason for the overspend.
Thank you. Yeah, I did see it actually the other day, but I mean, that is the cost of a house, and it is a kiosk. So that's my concern with that one. And then the other thing about capital is sometimes underspend is underdo. And my worry is particularly with regard to the public realm greening, and I know that was greening and lighting, and we've obviously seen a bit of greening, but given that we're always talking about different things like safety in the town centre, it's a shame that the lighting is lagging so far behind the greening, and I just wondered if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on when we might get some of the lighting, because it says it'd be unlikely there'll be any significant spend this year. Thank you.
I mean, the main item there is to do with work in Earl Street and pedestrianisation, or not just pedestrianisation, but doing a similar kind of finish as we've got elsewhere in the town centre. And although it was allocated to this year in the budget, as it explained, it's unlikely that the spend will happen this year, but it's something that I know that members are very committed to carrying forward as part of the overall strategy for the town centre. So yes, it will slip, but with every confidence it will be delivered.
Yeah, if I can just reassure Councillor Russell that all of the lighting work has been undertaken, and now you can see that the light levels go up and down, and they actually work in some of the bottom parts of the town, particularly the River Medway. So that is in place, and Mr. Green is right that there was a proposal for the junction of Wheat Street and Face Street going down to Museum Street. What it is hoped now is that it will be a bigger scheme which has brought in some external funding from some other partners which came available, and so therefore there is a redesign on the scheme, but hopefully though there may be some slippage in terms of the implementation date, the finished project will be a more impressive one. We hope it will be on a greater scale than that in the High Street.
Councillor Russell.
So just to clarify, the lighting part of this is done. We're done with the lighting. Thank you.
I was just going to add that, I mean, obviously the council were undertaking the town centre reviews work, so there may be benefits of this thing in a way slipping, because as work on a town centre strategy proceeds, it can be, updated in terms of the allocation of this money. The only thing I suppose with tongue-in-cheek I would say, as you would expect, is that with this level of slippage in the capital programme and what I saw last night, we could have done the preliminary work on our leisure centre in the bottom line, but anyway, that's not going to happen. So. Are we happy to agree the recommendations on page 229? So the revenue position at the end of quarter one for 2025-26, including the actions taken or being proposed to improve the position where significant variances have been identified, been noted, and the capital position at the end of quarter one for 25-26 be noted. Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Well, we've got through the meeting in 55 minutes.